Good afternoon and welcome to your lecture on Paper 2, Module 3, Feminist Articulations. I am Professor Sarvajit Mukherjee from the Department of English, University of Allahabad. Writing by women must be regarded as a major development in women's empowerment. Given the fact that let alone education, the acquisition of basic literacy has been a hard-won achievement even for men, the odds against women getting educated enough to express themselves have been great. It is interesting to speculate who the first women must have been who took the trouble to get educated, but no doubt this must have been a major step of subversion. There are enough examples from India to show how great the struggle for education was for women. Hymns composed by women in the Vedas and the writings of Buddhist nuns notwithstanding. However, the dawn of feminist consciousness in the West was the result of writing by educated and informed women, as is well documented. Mary Wollstonecraft dates 1759 to 1797 is regarded as the most important foremother of Western feminism. Wollstonecraft focused on women's education. She justified the education of women that it would help women fulfill their social roles as wife and mother. Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Women is considered to be the first text of Western feminism. The French Revolution had thrown up the idea of the rights of man. As feminists have pointed out, the word man presumes the automatic inclusion of women. That this is not so was first suggested by Wollstonecraft's title. Motivated by Enlightenment values, Wollstonecraft advocated that rationality and reason be given precedence over sensibility and emotions in women. According to Wollstonecraft, this would be possible only if women were educated. She insisted that a woman must be educated so as to be able to perform her social duty as wife and mother efficiently. Women were the first teachers of their children and therefore needed to be educated. Education would also ensure that women were companions for their husbands, not mere chattels. It is interesting to note that similar arguments were advanced in favor of educating women by the reformists in India in the 19th century. Mary Wollstonecraft had the courage to challenge the ideas of Rousseau, current in the 18th century, that women did not need an education, were irrational and emotional creatures, and best remained so. In America, Margaret Fuller, eminent journalist and editor, also emphasized the education of women, but in order to help women opt for other roles than purely domestic ones. Margaret Fuller parallels the achievements of Mary Wollstonecraft in the USA. Fuller's Woman in the 19th Century, published in 1845, is a powerful treatise on the emancipation of women. Fuller stresses education, employment, and political rights for women. Unlike Wollstonecraft, Fuller does not champion education for women to make them better wives and mothers. Rather, education is important for a woman because it makes her employable and gives her other roles than purely domestic ones. Anticipating Virginia Woolf's views by nearly a century, Fuller advocates androgyny. According to her, there is nothing like a complete male or complete female. Rather, each gender has some elements of the other. Fuller also brought an abiding spiritual commitment into her writings. She was concerned with the unequal relations between the classes and between the blacks and the whites in America. She also worked for prison reforms and the lot of women prisoners. However, the contribution of both Wollstonecraft and Fuller were supposed to have reached their logical conclusion by the beginning of the 20th century, it being widely presumed that women had achieved all that they were struggling for by the 1920s. That this was a misconception was proven by Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf focuses on issues of authorship and androgyny besides education. She spells out the difficulties encountered by a woman writer and suggests a new approach to literature, one that does not reject the domestic as trivial. She also suggested adopting a language that is women-specific. Virginia Woolf was born into an eminent Victorian family and belonged to the class that should have reaped the maximum benefit of the women's struggle for empowerment in the previous century. In her writings, Virginia Woolf proves that even women from affluent and educated families suffer under multiple oppressions. Virginia Woolf was the first feminist writer to concern herself with authorship, and in two epoch-marking essays, namely A Room of One's Own, published in 1929, and